The evening was supposed to be like any other. Family dinner. My parents' house. The usual warm smell of a hearty meal drifting through the air. The hum of casual conversation, laughter echoing off the walls, familiar faces gathered around the table. It was a setting that felt comforting, like I could slip right back into the routine without a second thought. But the truth is, for me, nothing was the same. Not anymore. I walked in through the front door, and immediately, my pulse hit me like a hammer, loud and fast. It was like the entire world slowed down around me. There was no music, no chatter, nothing but the thunder of my own heart as I stepped into the room. My mom, dad, Noah, his kids. All of them were there, smiling, catching up, passing around the mashed potatoes like nothing was wrong. But that's when I saw her. Amanda, my wife, sitting at the head of the table, wearing that smile. The one that used to light up my world, but now just felt fake. She greeted me with that same perfect little grin like she hadn't been lying to my face for months. She was playing the part, making small talk, talking to everyone but me. She had this little sparkle in her eye, like she thought I didn't know. She looked so damn calm, so normal, it made me sick. And then there was him. Daniel. I had to stop myself from reacting when I saw him sitting across from her. Smug as hell. Leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. No one knew what was coming. They had no idea I had the truth right in my pocket, ready to be unleashed. I'm not sure if he noticed me at first, but the moment I locked eyes with him, I could see the recognition in his face. The man who had been sleeping with my wife for who knows how long. The man who had been whispering sweet lies in her ear. The man who thought he could tear my life apart and get away with it. The anger in me was burning like a firestorm. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something else, something darker. I wasn't scared. I was pissed. But I had to keep it together, had to play my part for a little while longer. So, I greeted everyone the way I was supposed to. Told my parents I'd been busy, asked Noah how the kids were doing. I pretended. I faked it. Like I always had for so long. But this time, the difference was, I wasn't just faking it anymore. In my pocket, the small cold weight of the flash drive felt heavier than it ever had. My stomach churned with a mix of dread and something else. I was sick to my core, but I also knew, this was it. This was the moment everything changed. Tonight, Amanda's lies were going to come crashing down, and nothing would ever be the same again. It felt like hours before I could finally take my next step. Every second of that dinner dragged on, like some sick form of torture. Amanda kept talking, laughing, making small talk with the family. So casual, so unaware. I watched her from across the table, watching the way she flicked her hair back, how she leaned in close to Daniel as if they were sharing some private joke. That fake laugh of hers rang in my ears, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my pulse still hammering, but now with a sharper edge. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I had to do something. Anything. No one else seemed to notice anything was off though. My mom and dad were talking about the weather. Noah was joking with the kids. It was like they couldn't see the elephant in the room. Or maybe they didn't want to. I don't know. Either way, I couldn't sit there and smile anymore. Not when every time Amanda laughed, I felt like I was swallowing glass. I excused myself from the table, saying I needed to grab a drink from the kitchen. I needed a moment to breathe, but really, I just needed a few seconds to steady myself. To remind myself that tonight wasn't about her, or him, or anyone else. Tonight was about me. And I wasn't going to walk out of here as the fool. Not this time. I went to the kitchen and took a deep breath. The silence in the house felt different now. Too quiet. I thought about everything I had seen. The messages. The videos. The lies Amanda had fed me for months. The way she'd looked at me, pretending everything was fine, pretending I didn't notice the way she'd been pulling away. She had thought I was stupid. Thought I wouldn't find out. Thought she could just play me like a fool. I grabbed the bottle of bourbon from the cabinet. It wasn't for me, it was for them. I needed them to feel the same thing I'd felt when I first saw what they'd done behind my back. The anger, the humiliation, the betrayal. I couldn't fix that, but I could make sure they didn't walk away from tonight without facing the truth. I took the bottle with me back into the living room, but before I could even sit down, I saw the TV in the corner of the room. It was just sitting there, like it had been waiting for me. That was when I knew it was time. I went straight for it. Amanda was still laughing, still playing her role. But Daniel, he was watching me. He knew. He could feel the change in the air, like he was sensing the storm coming. That was fine. He'd get to feel it soon enough. I walked over to the TV, my hands tight around the flash drive in my pocket. My breath was steady now, but the adrenaline was still there, coursing through me. I didn't even look at Amanda or Daniel. Didn't need to. I didn't need their lies anymore. I had the truth in my hand, and that was all that mattered. Without a word, I plugged the flash drive into the console. The room fell silent. I didn't need to say anything. I swear, for a second, everything stopped. The hum of conversation, the clink of silverware, it all faded away the moment I hit play. There was a crackling silence in the air, like the room was holding its breath. I didn't glance at anyone. I couldn't. My eyes were locked on the screen, watching the image flicker to life. At first, all I saw was Amanda's face, her wide eyes and that stupid smile of hers. She was standing in some hotel room, the bed a mess behind her, and I could hear the faint buzz of a phone vibrating on the nightstand. And then, there he was, Daniel, leaning in close, whispering something to her that made her laugh. The kind of laugh that used to make me feel like I was the luckiest guy in the world. But now, it made me feel like I was drowning. The sound of her voice came through the speakers, crisp and clear, like a punch to the gut. I can't wait for this to be over. We're almost there. Just a little longer. Yeah, it'll be perfect. Just like we planned. Once we're out, it's all ours. No more pretending. I didn't need to hear any more. I could feel my hands tighten into fists, my chest rising and falling with the kind of rage I hadn't known I was capable of. It wasn't just the physical betrayal anymore. It wasn't about the fact that she had slept with him. It was about everything else. The plans. The lies. The way she had stood in front of me, held me close, kissed me goodnight, all the while knowing what she was really doing. She had been planning her escape with him for months. They'd plotted it all out. They had the details, from how they'd leave me to where they'd move, how they'd start over like nothing had ever happened. The sound of Amanda's laugh came through the speakers again, but this time, it made my stomach turn. It was so damn fake, so full of mockery, it felt like I was being suffocated by it. In that moment, I was no longer the husband who'd been betrayed. I was the man who'd been played. The room was completely still, and I could feel every pair of eyes on me. No one knew what to say. Hell, I don't think anyone could even breathe. It was like they were waiting for me to make the next move. I glanced at Amanda, still sitting there at the table, looking like she was frozen in time. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. It was the first real crack I'd seen in her perfect little act. I looked at Daniel, sitting across from her. He looked confident at first, maybe even smug, but the more he saw on the screen, the more that arrogance started to drain from his face. He wasn't the big, tough guy anymore. He wasn't the one calling the shots. No. He was just a man caught in the middle of his own mess. I didn't speak. Not yet. I couldn't. Instead, I hit play again. This time, it wasn't just a video. It was a conversation. One I had no idea had been happening behind my back. It was Amanda and Daniel, talking about me. Talking about us. I could hear the venom in Amanda's voice. The way she'd talked about the years we'd spent together, the way she'd laughed about me, about how easy it would be to just walk away. She didn't care. She didn't care about anything. He'll never see it coming. I'll just tell him I'm leaving. He'll understand. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't even bring myself to look at her. The hurt was already too deep. The disappointment. God, I couldn't even describe it. And then there was the part that made everything come crashing down for me. The part where they talked about me. Where they laughed about how nice I was, how easy it would be to pull off. They didn't even see me as a person anymore. I was just someone to be discarded when the fun was over. I felt a cold chill run through me, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. But then something else clicked inside me. something that made the anger burn brighter than before. This wasn't just about them. This was about me. This was about reclaiming everything they had stolen from me. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not tonight. The room stayed silent, but the tension was so thick, I could have cut it with a knife. Everyone was still staring at the screen, probably trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. It felt like time had stopped, everyone in shock, unsure of what to do, not wanting to be the first to speak. I couldn't blame them. Hell, I didn't want to say anything, either. I just wanted them to sit in the same quiet hell that I had been living in for months. But I wasn't about to let it end there. Not now. Not when I had their truth in front of me. I looked at Amanda again, and this time, her eyes weren't full of fake happiness. They were wide with panic, like she couldn't believe the reality crashing down around her. Her face had drained of color, and she was barely holding it together. I could see the sweat gathering on her forehead, the way her hands gripped the edge of the table like she was holding on to her last thread of control. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I didn't need her to say anything. Her silence was deafening enough. I turned to Daniel next, the man who'd thought he could walk into my life and rip it apart without consequence. He was trying to act tough, but I could see the cracks forming. His hands were twitching, his jaw clenched tight, and his eyes kept darting between the screen and me like he was looking for an escape. There was no escape though. Not anymore. For a moment, all I could do was watch them. Watch as the reality of what they'd done finally sank in. They were both caught, their lies hanging in the air like a stench neither could get rid of. They were no longer in control. I was. Finally, Amanda spoke, her voice shaking like a leaf in the wind. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she stammered. But I didn't hear any regret in her words, just the panic that comes when a liar realizes they've been exposed. You didn't mean for it to go this far? I repeated, my voice steady but full of ice. You've been planning this behind my back for months. You and him. And now, all of a sudden, you didn't mean for it to go this far. Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something, but the words caught in her throat. She looked around at my family, desperate for someone to save her. But no one spoke. No one defended her. I wanted to laugh, honestly. The irony of it all. She had thought she could just tear our life apart, walk away with him, and leave me in the dust, broken and alone. But here we were. Her world was crumbling around her, and all she had was the remnants of her lies. I could feel Noah's eyes on me, his face a mix of confusion and disbelief. He hadn't known. Hell, no one had known. I had kept it all inside, all the hurt, the humiliation, the betrayal. But I wasn't keeping it in anymore. This was my moment to show them. To show Amanda, to show Daniel, that I wasn't some naive fool. That I wasn't someone they could just step on without consequence. Amanda started to speak again, her voice now barely above a whisper. Please, just let me explain. I held up my hand, cutting her off. Explain? What's there to explain, Amanda? You were already plotting your escape. You were already planning your life without me. She looked down at the table, not able to meet my eyes anymore. For the first time, I saw a hint of shame in her face. But it was too little, too late. I turned back to Daniel, locking eyes with him, and I saw the same fear I had seen in Amanda's eyes, only this time it was raw. He wasn't in control anymore. He wasn't the man who thought he could take what was mine. He was just a man caught in the wreckage of his own choices. How long were you planning this, Daniel? I asked, my voice low but hard. How long were you sleeping with my wife behind my back? He tried to stand tall, but his voice cracked when he answered, It wasn't like that, man. It just happened. It wasn't planned. I didn't buy it. You're a liar, Daniel. You planned this. You both did. Don't even try to tell me it wasn't planned. I could see his lips trembling, his hands now fidgeting with his shirt sleeves. He was trying to keep his composure, but the cracks were showing. Amanda finally raised her head, looking me dead in the eye, her voice thick with desperation. I never wanted to hurt you. She trailed off, her words failing her. What, Amanda? You just wanted a fresh start? You just wanted to have fun, right? I was a good husband, and you decided to betray me for him? Her silence said it all. There was nothing left to say. The room felt colder now. My family was still there, still watching, but no one said a word. They knew what was happening. They knew this wasn't just some petty argument or misunderstanding. This was real. This was the end of something. Something I had trusted, something I had fought for, something that had been shattered by two people who thought they could get away with it. The silence stretched on, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was suffocating. And I was done. The silence in the room was like a living thing, heavy and oppressive. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me, but I didn't care. I didn't need their pity. I didn't need anyone to speak up for me. This moment wasn't about them. It wasn't about what anyone else thought. It was about taking back control, about standing in the wreckage of everything they tried to destroy and saying, "Not today." I turned away from Amanda and Daniel, because honestly, I didn't need to look at them anymore. They were beneath me now. I was done being the victim, done playing the part of the guy who was just going to let life walk all over him. I didn't owe either of them a damn thing. Not an explanation. Not an apology. I could feel Noah's eyes on me though. I could tell he didn't know what to say, how to react. I don't blame him. Hell, I didn't know what the hell to do either, but I had to get a grip. I grabbed the glass of bourbon I'd left on the counter earlier, took a deep swig, and set it down with a firm hand. The burn of the liquor helped clear my head, but it didn't change anything. It didn't change what they'd done to me. Amanda was still sitting there, twisting her napkin in her hands like it was going to somehow magically fix this. She couldn't even look at me now. I could see the panic creeping into her face, but it was too late for apologies. Too late for "we can fix this" talks. All of that had been said long before tonight. "You're not going to say anything, are you?" I asked her, my voice low but sharp. She opened her mouth, but it was just a breath, no words coming out. I couldn't help but laugh. It was pathetic. She had no more excuses. She had no more lies. All the little things she'd said to me over the years, the promises, the sweet nothings, were gone now, turned to dust. She was nothing more than a stranger sitting at my parents' table, and I was done pretending she was still my wife. I didn't even want to hear her side of the story anymore. What was the point? There was no fixing this. There was no going back. I turned to Daniel, who had been quietly watching me. His face had lost all the arrogance he'd walked in with, replaced by something I hadn't expected. Fear. Real fear. The kind that made his hands shake, made his breath hitch. He'd been so sure of himself before, but now? Now he knew what it felt like to be on the other side of the betrayal. He knew the kind of damage he'd done. I stepped toward him. Didn't say a word, just stepped in close. He shifted back a little, like he was trying to get away from me, but I wasn't about to let him off the hook that easily. "You think you can just waltz in here, destroy my life, and walk away unscathed? You think you can just take whatever you want?" I could see his lips trembling, but he didn't speak. He didn't try to explain himself. What was there to say? He couldn't undo what he'd done. He couldn't put the pieces of my life back together. And honestly, I didn't need him to. I took a deep breath and turned back to the room, my eyes sweeping across my family. They were all still sitting there, frozen in place. My parents had this mix of shock and disappointment in their eyes. Noah looked like he didn't know if he should say something or just leave. It didn't matter. This wasn't their fight. "I hope you're both proud of yourselves," I said, my voice steady now, calmer than I expected. "You've ruined everything. You've ruined my trust, my life, and you think you can just walk away from it?" Amanda's face twisted, her eyes finally locking with mine. There was fear there now. Not the cocky, entitled fear of someone who thought they had the upper hand. No, this was different. This was the fear of someone who knew the truth was out, someone who couldn't take back what they had done. I could see the guilt, the shame, starting to eat at her from the inside. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't going to fix anything. "Please," she said, finally finding her voice, "but it wasn't enough to make me care anymore. We can fix this. I never meant for you to find out this way. You never meant for it to happen this way." I cut her off, my voice rising now, louder than I intended. "You've been lying to me for months, Amanda. You've been planning this behind my back. And now you want me to just pretend none of this happened? To just forgive you? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because there was no going back. I took another step forward, and I could see her physically shrink in her seat. Her hands were shaking now, her eyes darting nervously to my family, but they weren't going to save her. They weren't going to save either of them. No. This is done. I said it clearly, firmly. You've made your choices. Now you'll live with them. I turned to my parents, and for the first time that night, I really saw the disappointment in their eyes. I couldn't blame them, but it didn't matter. This wasn't about them. It was about me, about taking back what they had tried to destroy. I'm done with both of them, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't try to fix this. There's nothing left to fix. With that, I walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind me, but I didn't look back. They had no idea how right I was. I walked out of that house feeling like a weight had been lifted, but there was still that knot in my stomach. The kind that's been there so long, you don't even realize it's there until it's gone. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to clarity. I wasn't going to be the guy who let them walk all over me anymore. I wasn't going to be the guy who pretended nothing was wrong just to keep the peace. But even though I felt stronger, the emptiness was still there. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the loss. The loss of something I had poured years into, something I thought I understood. I didn't even know where I was going as I drove through the streets that night. The city lights blurred as my mind replayed the evening. Her face, Daniel's face, the silence in the room, the looks from my family. It was like I was stuck in a loop. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just that Amanda had cheated. It was the way she'd kept pretending like everything was fine, like she wasn't slowly, quietly shredding our life apart. It was the lies, the manipulation, the way she'd used me like I was a backup plan, a comfort, while she was already planning her escape with him. I pulled over to a park, not really thinking about it, just needing a minute to breathe. I sat in the car for a while, staring at the empty space in front of me, trying to process everything. I thought about calling Noah, telling him what happened, but I didn't know if I could. I didn't want him to feel like he had to choose sides. I didn't want him to be caught in the middle of this mess. So I just sat there, alone with the anger that still bubbled up inside me. I had done everything right, hadn't I? I had been a good husband. I had worked hard, tried to be the guy she could count on. And all the while she had been lying to me, hiding behind that smile, plotting her escape. The betrayal stung, sure, but it was the disrespect that hurt the most. She had thought she could just walk away and I'd be none the wiser. It wasn't fair. And in that moment, it hit me. This wasn't just about Amanda and Daniel. It wasn't even just about the affair. This was about me too. I had been letting her dictate my worth for far too long. Letting her make me feel small, while she got to play the role of the victim, pretending she had no idea how much damage she was causing. But I was done with that. I pulled myself together and drove home. When I walked through the door, the house felt colder than it had before. There was no Amanda, no kids to break the silence, just emptiness. I stood there for a second, just breathing, trying to shake off the weight of the evening. But the truth was, it felt good. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had lost. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I didn't know if I'd ever get over what Amanda had done. But what I did know was this. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. Not anymore. The anger had burned bright, but now it was fading, leaving behind something I hadn't expected, relief. And for the first time in months, I let myself believe that there was life after this. There was a future. It might not be the one I had planned, but it was mine to shape. I wasn't broken. Not yet. Not if I didn't let them break me. The next few days felt like a fog. I was moving through life, but it was all kind of distant. I went to work, talked to the guys in the break room, tried to act like I was normal. But nothing felt normal. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach dropped, thinking it was Amanda or maybe someone from the family reaching out. But there was nothing. Not from her. Not from Daniel. They both just disappeared. I didn't care. I didn't expect an apology, and honestly, I wasn't sure I'd even be able to hear it if one came. I had reached a point where I realized that no words could fix what had happened. Nothing could undo the betrayal, the way they had both laughed behind my back, planned their escape like I was some kind of joke. I tried to keep myself busy, working on some of the projects around the house I'd been putting off, catching up with old friends I hadn't talked to in ages. It was distracting, but it was also a way of taking control again. I wasn't just going to sit around and wallow in my own misery. A couple of weeks later, Noah called me. I had been avoiding him because I knew he was probably pissed I hadn't reached out sooner, but I didn't want to burden him with the details. I wasn't sure how to tell him what had happened, especially since I didn't want him to hate Amanda. She was his sister, after all. But when I picked up the phone, it was clear that the cat was already out of the bag. "So, Mom told me everything," he said, his voice quieter than usual. I leaned back against the counter in my kitchen, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. Yeah. I didn't want to be the one to say it, but it's true. Everything you heard. It's all real. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could tell Noah was processing it. I don't know what to say, man. I mean, I'm sorry. I didn't want to believe it, but she's been different for a while now. I guess I just didn't want to see it. I ran a hand through my hair, a bitter chuckle slipping out before I could stop it. None of us wanted to see it, man. But it's been there, right in front of us. She's been pulling away for months. All this time, I thought I was just being paranoid. Turns out, I wasn't paranoid enough. Noah sighed, and I could hear the weight of everything in his voice. You didn't deserve that, bro. You're a good guy. Hell, everyone knew how much you loved her, and she did this. She just destroyed everything. I'm pissed at her. Really pissed. I could feel the knot in my chest loosen a little. Noah wasn't taking sides, and that meant more than I could put into words. I don't want you to hate her, Noah. She's still your sister, no matter what. But I can't go back. I can't forgive her. Not for this. There was another long pause. Then Noah finally spoke. I get it, man. I do. But listen, I'm here for you. Always. Whatever you need. You're not alone in this. That was the first time since all this started that I actually felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone. The weight of it all wasn't as suffocating. My brother had my back. He didn't have to choose between me and Amanda. He could see the truth, even if it wasn't easy. And that felt like a lifeline. The days that followed were hard, sure, but not impossible. I spent a lot of time just thinking about where I was going. I still didn't know the answer, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't going to let Amanda's mess define me. One night, a couple of months later, I ran into an old friend, Kelly, from back in the day. We used to hang out a lot before life got busy and relationships happened. She was just as warm and easygoing as I remembered, and we started talking like no time had passed. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't trying to jump into a new relationship or anything like that, but there was something about being around her that felt good, real. No pretenses. Just two people catching up. She didn't know about Amanda or the affair. I hadn't told her anything yet, but the more we talked, the more I realized I wasn't carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders anymore. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't consumed by the anger or the hurt. I was actually enjoying the conversation. I was able to laugh. It felt strange, but in a good way. Like maybe there was more to life than this chapter of pain and disappointment. After we parted ways, Kelly gave me her number, and I texted her a simple, "Thanks for the chat. Really needed that." She replied almost instantly with, "Same here. Let's do it again soon. It's been too long." I smiled at my phone, a small spark of hope lighting up inside me. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe there was something better out there for me. The idea of moving on was scary, but it didn't feel impossible anymore. And that felt like victory. A few weeks went by after that night with Kelly. We saw each other a couple of times. Just grabbing coffee or catching a movie. Nothing intense. Nothing with expectations. But there was something in the way she listened to me, the way she didn't judge or try to fix things. She just got it. It felt so damn easy, like I could just be myself around her. And after everything that had happened with Amanda, That was a breath of fresh air I didn't even know I needed. But I wasn't jumping into anything. I wasn't trying to fill the hole Amanda left with someone else. I'd been through enough betrayal and lies to know better than to rush into something out of loneliness. No, this was different. Kelly was someone I could talk to without feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. She didn't have an agenda. She wasn't looking to take advantage of me. One evening, after we had just finished dinner at a small cozy restaurant, Kelly asked me how I was really doing. She wasn't asking in the way people normally ask, like when they want a quick, "I'm fine" answer. She wanted to know. She wanted the truth. I had never really talked about what had happened with Amanda. Not in depth. I had kept it all bottled up, sharing bits and pieces with Noah, but not really letting anyone in. But with Kelly it felt different. She wasn't trying to rush me, and there was no judgment in her eyes. Just understanding. It's been a rough few months, I started, stirring my coffee, not looking at her at first. I never thought she'd do that. I never thought she could do that. I swallowed hard, but I didn't feel the same weight in my chest. I wasn't broken anymore. I was just speaking the truth. Kelly didn't say anything for a while, just letting me talk. And when I finally looked at her, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: genuine empathy. She said, her voice quiet but steady, you don't have to carry all of this on your own. I know it's not easy. I can't pretend to know what you've been through, but I can listen. And sometimes that's enough. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for someone to see me like that. Not after everything with Amanda. But I wasn't going to pull away. Not this time. I don't even know what I want anymore, I confessed, my voice coming out more raw than I expected. I don't know if I can trust anyone again. I don't know if I'm capable of that. Kelly gave me a soft smile, the kind that didn't feel forced or rehearsed. It's okay to not know. You don't have to figure everything out right away. But you're not alone in this. That hit me harder than I realized. I hadn't really felt not alone in a long time. Not since before Amanda. And it was scary, honestly. Scary to think about letting someone else in. Scary to think about trusting again. But it felt like I was starting to take the first steps toward something new. Something that wasn't defined by my past mistakes or Amanda's betrayal. For the first time in months, I felt like there was hope. Not in a big, grand way, but in small, quiet moments. In moments where I didn't feel like I had to keep my guard up. The next couple of weeks were a mix of small breakthroughs. I started taking better care of myself, getting back into the gym, picking up hobbies I'd let slide, reconnecting with old friends who had reached out but I'd ignored. I wasn't doing it for anyone else. I was doing it for me. For the person I had lost track of while I'd been so wrapped up in the wreckage of my marriage. And then, one evening, after a few more dates with Kelly, I realized something. I wasn't just starting to feel like myself again. I was starting to feel. I was beginning to understand that I didn't need Amanda or Daniel or anyone else to give me my worth. It wasn't about what they'd taken from me. It was about what I could rebuild on my own. So when Kelly called me one night and asked if I wanted to go for a walk, I said yes. It was late, and the city was quiet, but there was something comforting about the stillness. We walked along the park by the river, talking about everything and nothing. It felt easy, like we were just two people enjoying each other's company with no strings attached. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling casual. The conversation slowed, and we both looked up at the stars. The night air was cool, and it felt like the perfect moment. I never expected to meet someone like you after everything that's happened, I said, half laughing, but there was truth in my voice. Kelly turned to look at me, her smile gentle. I didn't expect to meet someone like you either. But I'm glad I did. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Not for some grand future or perfect life. Just hope for the next day. Hope that I could be okay again. Hope that things didn't have to stay broken forever. I wasn't fixed, and I didn't need to be. But maybe, just maybe, I was starting to heal. The weeks after that night with Kelly felt like a slow but steady climb. I wasn't in any rush, didn't have some grand vision of where I was going. I didn't need to get over it, or move on as fast as possible. It was more like I was learning how to live again. Not as the guy who'd been betrayed, but just as me, the guy who had survived all that crap, picked up the pieces and was still standing. It wasn't easy. There were moments where I found myself still thinking about Amanda, about how she had made me feel small, how she had pretended for so long. And there were times when I felt a deep anger, like a fire that flared up and threatened to burn everything in its path. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. I wasn't letting them take up as much space in my head anymore. Kelly and I kept hanging out, and while I wasn't jumping headfirst into a new relationship, there was something real between us. Something genuine. We didn't rush things, and maybe that's what made it feel different. We talked about life, about what we wanted, about what we'd been through, but it was more about listening than trying to fix things. And that was a damn good feeling, just being heard. One Saturday afternoon, Kelly and I were hanging out at my place. We'd just finished watching a movie, and she was making some offhand comment about how I was terrible at picking good films. I laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like I wasn't carrying all this baggage around. It was simple, comfortable. But as we were cleaning up, she turned to me, her face suddenly serious. "You know, I really admire you, right?" she said, putting a plate in the sink. I looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, after everything you've been through, you're still here. You're still fighting. And that takes guts." It hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't really thought about it that way before. I had been just surviving, getting through the days, keeping my head above water. But Kelly saw it differently. She saw strength where I saw just getting by. "Thanks," I said quietly, the weight of her words sitting with me for a moment. I wasn't sure if I believed it yet, but it felt good to hear. It felt like maybe I was on the right track. The next day, I went to meet Noah. We hadn't really hung out much since everything went down, and I could tell he was still processing things in his own way. He was my brother though, my best friend, even if the past few months had thrown us off track. I wanted to talk to him, to really catch up and not just discuss Amanda or the mess she'd caused. We sat at a bar in town, a quiet place with a jukebox playing in the background and people just enjoying their drinks. We started talking about everything, work, life, sports, things that were normal. But then, Noah finally broke the silence, his voice low, but not sad, just reflective. "I know I haven't been around much, man. I just didn't know what to say to you, you know," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "I didn't know how to handle all this. I didn't want to say the wrong thing." I shrugged, taking a sip of my beer. "There's no playbook for this, Noah." Hell, I didn't know what to say either. But I'm here now, and that's what matters. He looked relieved, but there was still a weight to his expression. "I just don't want you to feel like you're alone in this, bro. I get that you don't want to talk about Amanda or Daniel or whatever, but you don't have to do it alone. You got me." For the first time in months, I felt the tiniest flicker of what felt like peace. Not that everything was fixed, or that all the anger had disappeared, but the support from Noah. It was a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. That no matter how much pain I'd gone through, there were people who had my back. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. "Thanks, man. I'm figuring it out. I don't have all the answers, but I'm getting there." And that was the truth. I wasn't fixed, I wasn't over it, but I was learning how to be okay with not being okay all the time. And that was enough for now. As the evening went on, the conversation drifted back to lighter stuff, some dumb sports debate, then memories from when we were younger. It felt like old times, and for a while, I wasn't thinking about Amanda or what she'd done. I wasn't consumed by the pain anymore. I wasn't angry. I was just me. And when I left the bar that night, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living again. Not for revenge. Not for the past. But for whatever came next. I wasn't sure what that would be yet, but I wasn't afraid of it. Maybe there was something out there for me. Maybe there wasn't. But I wasn't looking back anymore. I was stepping forward, one day at a time. A couple of months passed after that night with Noah, and things kept shifting in a way I didn't expect. Life didn't magically become perfect, and I wasn't one of those people who believed that everything happened for a reason. No, I wasn't suddenly whole again, and I sure as hell wasn't going to pretend like everything was fine. But I didn't need to be fine all the time. I had learned that. Kelly and I continued seeing each other, but I was careful. I wasn't rushing into anything, but it felt like we were building something solid, even if it was slow. She understood me, and I didn't have to hide behind any walls when I was with her. I could talk. I could breathe. And it was more than enough. I wasn't in love with her yet, not in some dramatic fairy tale way, but I was beginning to care. I liked who I was when I was around her. I liked that she made me feel seen, not in a way that was trying to fix anything but just by being there, being herself. But the real shift came on one quiet evening, just after I had gotten home from work. I sat on my couch, the TV humming in the background, but I wasn't really watching it. I was just thinking about everything that had happened, and how far I'd come. It was wild to think about how much I had changed in just a few months. There were times I'd still get angry at Amanda. Hell, even more so when I thought about the lies and everything she had put me through, but the anger wasn't as all-consuming anymore. It was just a part of the past now, something that had shaped me, but wasn't going to define me forever. And that's when I realized I was letting go of the bitterness, the resentment. I didn't need to hold on to the anger to feel like I'd won. I didn't need to carry that weight anymore. I didn't need Amanda to give me closure. I didn't need her apology or anything from her. It was like I was finally free. Free from the person I thought I had to be for her. Free from the bitterness that had clouded every thought. I was free to just live. A few weeks after that moment, Kelly and I decided to take a weekend trip out of town. It wasn't a big deal, just a couple of days to get away from everything, to unwind. And on that trip, I found myself smiling more than I had in a long time. I wasn't trying to hide my pain. I wasn't pretending to be someone I wasn't. I was just me. The real me, the one that had been buried under layers of hurt and lies for so long. And that was enough. At one point, as we were walking along the beach, Kelly stopped me. She turned to me, her eyes soft but searching. I could see that she wasn't trying to rush anything either, but I knew she had something on her mind. "You okay?" she asked, her voice steady. I smiled at her, a genuine smile, not the kind I used to give to hide what was really going on. "Yeah," I said, my voice full of peace. "I'm good. I think I'm finally good." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. I wasn't perfect. I hadn't figured out everything. I didn't have all the answers. But I had something better. I had peace. And that was the kind of victory I didn't expect. It wasn't about revenge or redemption. It was about taking back control of my life, piece by piece, and not letting the past drag me down anymore. Maybe there was still hurt in me. Maybe there always would be. But it wasn't the thing that defined me. I had learned to let go of the need to have the past fixed. I had learned that healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small steps, in moments of silence and moments of laughter. It happens when you finally stop looking backward and start looking forward. So, I stood there with Kelly, on that beach, watching the waves crash in front of us. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't need anything more than that moment. I was finally ready to move forward. And that was enough.